Hey guys, what is up? SuperKmanrocks here, and I am here for my LPL Finals overview and analysis for the 2023 Spring Split. Incredibly excited to jump into this. We've covered every single game in the LPL so far in 2023. I hope you guys have enjoyed the ride, whether that's been the regular season, whether that's been the playoffs up until this point, or if you're just joining us for the first time in this video. It's been a blast and a privilege to cover the LPL so far this year. It's probably been the most entertaining league to cover on the Rift across everything so far. And honestly, it's kind of a shame that it's coming to an end. A lot of really good action, but there is a very fun series in front of us, so let's not fret. I want to hear you guys' thoughts and opinions on what you thought was going to happen in this series down below. Who did you think was going to win? Did you have JDG? Did you have BLG? Who did you think was going to be moving on to MSI as the #1 seed? And who was going to be hoisting that trophy as LPL champions? I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts. Of course, if you want to know mine, you can check out the previous video that I posted, the semifinals analysis at the end. I kind of go over what I think is going to happen in this series a little bit. You can check that out up in the iCard right now. Of course, you can also enjoy a lot of the content that I put out in that same iCard, because my playlist for the LPL regular season will be in there as well if you want to get a more, overview, I guess you could say, of how I feel about a lot of these LPL teams. But of course, it's time to go over the finals. Only one series remains to crown our champions, and it's a matchup between the #1 seeded JD Gaming and the #5 seeded Bilibili Gaming. Not exactly the matchup we all thought we were going to be getting in the finals going into the playoffs. I heard a ridiculous amount of hype for Edward Gaming. I heard a ridiculous amount of hype for LNG. I even heard a lot of hype for Weibo. There were a lot of teams on a lot of people's tongues. Top Esports, OMG. A lot of teams that I think people were really expecting to be in this spot that weren't Bilibili Gaming, quite frankly. And here we are. We are here in the finals. I of course, always believed in JDG. That was never really a question for me. I know some other people weren't exactly super in on them, but my faith in them never wavered. I put them at #1 in my preseason power rankings, and they have not moved once since in my weekly power rankings. And so always had a feeling they'd be able to figure it out and get here, just because their high moments were a little bit too high. But BLG, on the other hand, a team that has only gotten better basically every single game that they have played across the spring split. They were really dysfunctional to start the year. It felt like June and Yagao in particular were just not really working on the same page, and then Bin was kind of having a down year in the top lane. Elk and On were really good. They were fantastic basically the entirety of the regular season. Elk was an MVP finalist for me, but BLG had some major problems, but a lot of them seemed to click, not only towards the back half of the season, because they were better towards the back half of the season, but in the playoffs especially, where they really started to find their footing. They destroyed Weibo. They went the distance with JDG the first time, and then took down OMG and EDG to be able to make it here into the finals. A really great run from them, basically no matter how today goes. This is going to be considered a successful split for them, but they have a real shot of being able to take down JDG. I've seen a lot of people kind of favoring them in this matchup because of how that first series went between these two teams. I, of course, went JDG in my predictions. I think I said 3-2, 3-1 as my spread. I think BLG has a chance to be able to win this, but JDG to me are favorites. They definitely are the team that I would be walking in here expecting to win. But BLG is a team that I've doubted before, and I'm certainly not going to make the mistake of overlooking them completely again. They certainly have a chance and an opportunity here to hoist their first ever LPL trophy. But how is it going to go down? Well, of course, on this channel, we go game by game, talking about what happened in each of those games, and we're going to be starting it off with game #1, and the winner of game #1 was JD Gaming. They do jump out to a 1-0 series lead here, which obviously is very important. Momentum in general is very important. It's been something that BLG has capitalized a lot on over the course of their playoffs. I think this might actually be their first ever Game 1 loss. Now, somebody could correct me in the comment section if that is incorrect, but I do believe that they have won every Game 1. They did against Weibo. I believe they did against JDG as well. That's the only series I don't quite remember. I know they did against OMG and EDG, but, JDG kind of jumping out to an early lead here, which is really, really good. And the way they did it was very convincing. They quite frankly just played BLG's style and were just kind of able to beat them. This is a pretty standard draft coming out from both sides. Not necessarily the most BLG draft coming out from BLG. Aphelios Thresh, not something they played a ton of. I mean, they played it a bit, but it's not really what you associate with what they've been playing in the playoffs so far. Xayah has been a huge pick for this team alongside, you know, the Blitzcranks and the Nautiluses and things like that. Thresh definitely fits into that category as well, but to not see Xayah here is a little bit of a surprise considering how good Elk has been on that champion, but a lot of other standard picks. Jax has been really big for Bin, Vigar's been really big for Yagao, and so I'm not entirely thrown back by it, but giving over Annie tonight is a little bit of a problem. It's been something that he's really capitalized on throughout this year, and you know, before we jump into anything, you can already see who my player of the game is. You can already see the score because it's up on the screen. We'll get into it in a bit, but you guys remember, like, literally last week when people were saying that Ruler was a Zeri one-trick and that if you took him off that champion, he was just an average AD carry. Where are those people now? Anyways, let's go ahead and talk about what happened in this game. The time and the score would make you think that this was kind of a blowout. This was not a blowout. This was actually a really close game for most of, you know, basically the early and mid game. First Dragon is really where things start to explode. It's the first big play of the game. BLG are able to get that Dragon. They're able to steal it. A really good smite by June. And then Yagao actually flashes in for first blood, but it costs him pretty heavily because Ruler is actually able to pick up a double kill on the back end of this fight. Now the Jinx is pretty strong. It's really accelerating where that Jinx is going to go. It's actually not a horrible trade in isolation for BLG, but you certainly don't want to see a ton of gold going over to Jinx. A couple of catches here and there, missing picks in the bot lane, Knight and Kanavi with a really good gank in the mid lane, but for the most part, the next, like, giant thing is going to be a big BLG fight win, which you probably weren't expecting looking at the scores of this game, but it was a really good fight in Upper River in the mid game at about 15-ish minutes for BLG to actually destroy and take the lead. It was a 3-for-0, which is really, really big for BLG. And this comp, really good engage by June, and Elk doing some good damage on the backline, and BLG's actually got a 2k gold lead at this point in the game, which is really strong. 2k gold at 15 minutes is actually a pretty difficult thing to overcome. Unfortunately, they're going into a team like JDG, who are just simply really, really good at the game of League of Legends. We saw some incredibly aggressive engages coming out from JDG, mostly coming out from Knight on this Annie. He was flashing in, going for these stuns, trying to get these flank plays going off, and quite frankly, most of them worked. They were really good engages that set up the Vi to be able to chain the CC, and more importantly, the Jinx to be able to free fire on the backline, and it was just fight after fight after fight. Small win here and there for JDG, but eventually they start to crack open the game. Ruler goes nuts at the Baron fight where they're able to secure that, and then they're just able to kind of run it down mid and end the game. And so good stuff from JDG. Definitely an okay thing to see in game number one. Kind of a style that they felt comfortable playing. They know that they're talented enough to be able to play from even against a team like BLG, and so as long as they feel comfortable enough not giving away this super big early lead that BLG has been pretty good at getting throughout the playoffs, I think they're going to feel pretty good about going into that mid to late game being relatively even. My player of the game is obviously going to go to Ruler. The amount of damage that he was doing is just sensational. His positioning is just better than other AD carries. I know we always talk about, you know, the aggressiveness, and that's something I really like in ADCs, but obviously you have to know when to do it, and Ruler is just the best AD carry in the world at knowing when to play aggro and knowing when to play passive. He just has this, like, sixth sense in the back of his head that kind of gives him this idea of when he can step up, when he can be a little bit more aggro, and when he knows the enemy team is going to be on him, basically, as soon as he walks up. And so just really good stuff coming out from him. He's the best AD carry in the world. I don't think it's really all that up for debate right now. To me, it's pretty clear. He's been amazing for JDG over the course of the year so far, even if he doesn't always get credit for it, and clearly he can play more than just the Zeri. But big credit to Knight in this game as well. A lot of fantastic engages, a lot of deaths, but a lot of that is him just jumping into the middle of BLG and being basically a frontliner with Annie here, which can be a really dangerous playstyle to play, but if you pull it off, I mean, you can pull off some incredible engages, some great stuns, you can set up your team really well. Hell, you can do a lot of damage. We saw him pick off Yagao, not only in lane, but out of lane, and some, you know, some solo kills, and so really good game from Knight. If Knight and Ruler play like this the whole series, it's not going to be close, and that's true for almost any matchup in the entire world, against Gen G or T1 as well. I think that, you know, if you have Knight and Ruler both playing at a super high level, they might be the two single best players in the entire world, you know, and so it's pretty difficult to beat that, and unfortunately BLG had to run into that this game. Kanavi was awesome, was a little bit concerned with him going into this series, not because he's bad, but just because he's inconsistent, or at least he has been playing with some of these players, but I think he's gotten back on track as the playoffs have gone on. Missing with some bad positioning, but it didn't really matter. BLG focused Lulu way too much and ended up having nothing left for the Jinx, and then 369 was fine in the top lane. But for BLG on the other side, my dud of the game is actually going to go to Yagao in the mid lane. I actually think he was just not very good in this game. That early first blood, you would would think, oh, we got first blood, that's a really good thing. But flashing in to get that first blood and then getting, basically your team set up to get double killed by Jinx really kind of initiated that snowball that helped Ruler get super far ahead, not to mention getting ganked to the mid lane and giving over free gold, and then getting caught in a side lane pick towards the end of the game that made it impossible for them to come back. Just not the best macro coming out from Yagao across this game. I certainly don't think it was the worst game you could ever possibly have, but he was, in my opinion, the most detrimental member of BLG in game number 1. I thought Bin was pretty bad on the Jax. This was going to be a question mark. Bin talked a lot of shit, and I mean a lot of shit, in the pregame interviews about 369, and clearly it fired him up. We're gonna have to see if Bin can, keep up with his words coming into this series, because game number 1 was definitely not in his favor. And then Elkanon really never got a chance to be able to capitalize. It felt like every single time BLG ended up engaging with the Jax, with the Wukong, it was when Threshhook was down, and it just kind of is the lack of synergy there that was really detrimental towards their late mid-game team fights, I should say. But BLG is still a good enough team to be able to come back from this. It's only 1-0 down. Where you really need to start worrying is if you go down 2-0, because then you have to win 3 games in a row against Kanavi, Knight, Ruler, 369 missing, and that's just going to be an incredibly difficult thing to do. So I would consider this a must-win for BLG here in game number 2. But for JDG, you're feeling good, you're feeling confident, you beat EDG pretty confidently, you're coming into this series feeling strong, you had some shit talk to you, but you are so talented, you know the game that you like to play, and you know how you want to come out of this series. You just got to be able to maintain control. But are they going to be able to do that, or is BLG going to fight back? Well, the winner of game number 2 was JD Gaming. They are able to take game number 2. They're able to move up into this series 2-0, and they're able to very quickly put BLG on split point here in the LPL. And I don't think a lot of people expected this series to go this way, but this was a dominant game from JDG. A 22-minute win coming out from them in finals is absolutely absurd. And man, when I believe it was Kanavi said the reason that they struggled with BLG in that first series was because BLG got to play and they were a little rusty. Maybe there's a little bit of truth to that, because they are looking dominant. I mean, just utterly dominant in this game. What ended up happening? Well, First Blood was very weird, I would say. Yagao ends up giving over First Blood on the Galio on purpose in order to get June a stack on Kindred, which, I think is okay. Like, it could be possible, but he just played it so poorly. Although I do want to say Knight also played it really well. Yagao does go all the way in with the Galio to try and get that knock-up as the Kindred's coming in. Knight basically perfect pixel flashes it to make him have to burn everything to get in. But, for Knight to be able to pick up the first blood on Ahri, like, that's certainly not going to be a problem, even if he trades back a mark onto Kindred. But, outside of that, honestly, BLG wasn't all that bad in the early game. Elk in particular was a lot of fun to watch. The dude flashes under tower to kill the Jinx, and that's a lot of fun. Elk is just so good. He is the heart and soul of BLG. I know people really like Bin, but Elk is the guy. Like, Elk is the guy on this team that wins them games, and, they've recognized that. Unfortunately, JDG recognized that as well, because the mid-game came in, and JDG was like, well, we'll let anyone other than Elk beat us, and they started focusing this Aphelios over and over and over again. They're like, June on one of his best champions in Kindred, let him beat us. Bin on one of his best champions in Jax, let him beat us, because as long as it's not Elk, we're gonna feel pretty good. And you know what? They were right. We ended up getting to second dragon, and this is really where the game just completely imploded for BLG. They want to fight over it almost entirely. They do end up getting it, but the fight does not go in their favor. Very weird communication coming out from the team. I imagine they just were not on the same page, because Bin goes all the way in and basically gets a 5-man stun with the Jaxi, and I'm like, oh my god, this is a free fight. Somebody do damage, and everyone else is running away. And it's like, clearly we're not on the same page. Clearly we're not communicating in the same way that we need to be in the frickin' finals. And BLG ends up being like, oh, I guess we should probably go now, but they're too late. So JDG gets unstunned, they blow up the Jax, and then they get like 3 or 4 more. And at that point, the game is over. Like, it's 4K gold. Clearly BLG's not on the same page. And a part of the game that they were honestly pretty good at in their series against EDG, but good stuff from JDG. They're able to get the Baron with a pretty massively dominant fight, I would say, overall, and then just kind of control the game up until it ends. But for JDG, I mean, again, they just look dominant. They look like the team that we wanted them to look like in the finals. This is the JDG I think we all wanted to see, with T1 stumbling in the finals against Gen G. As good as Gen G is as a team, and as good as T1 still is as a team, I think there's a real big argument, especially with how this series is going, that JD Gaming is the best team in the world. I think we all kind of expected them to be in the preseason, and they really are living living up to a lot of that hype. Their wins are better than anybody else's wins in the world, and that includes T1s in my opinion. Knight is going to get my player of the game here in game number 2. He was great. I think you could give it to a lot of people. Missing was pretty good on the Rakan outside of the time he got his ankles completely broken by Blitzcrank in the bottom river, and then I thought Kanavi was great. 369 ended up solo killing Yagao in this game. The only one that I think maybe had some questionable plays was Ruler, and that was really just him getting dove under tower, which isn't entirely his fault. It's just Elk playing incredibly out of his mind. But, JDG's just really good across the board. The reason that they are this strong is not because they have one player, because BLG has one player. It's because they have a bunch of all-pros, right? They have a team full of all-pros. Not to discredit BLG, because they are really good, and I like Bin as a player, and he made some good plays this game. But Jun and Yagao have reverted to regular season form, and that's going to be a problem for BLG. They relied so much on Jun in particular stepping up in the playoffs. I think Yagao really started to get the hang of playing with Elk and with Bin towards the back half of the regular season, but Jun was kind of the last holdout, I would say, from this team feeling super cohesive, and that cohesion is certainly gone in this series right now. It just does not feel like they are on the same page. I think you got to get rid of the Aphelios pick. You yourself banned out the Xayah, and now I'm just confused. You don't want to get into this late game scaling game with JDG. It's not how you got here. You got here by playing early. You got here by playing fast and aggressive against scaling teams. Teams like OMG, teams like EDG, teams that wanted to play for those late game team fights. You decided you were going to beat them early, and you kind of went for that strategy pretty hard. It just wasn't going to work out in this game. I understand Kindred Galio is a big pick for you guys, and you put Comfort for Ben, you put Comfort for On, the Jackson, the Blitzcrank, but it's just such a bad matchup into JDG in particular as a team. I want to see early aggression. I want to see them go out and actively try to make plays. That's what's going to make me feel more confident in what BLG is doing. But they got to do it now. They are on series point here. One more loss, and their season is over. They're already going to MSI. You certainly don't want to get swept off the rift in the LPL finals, but for JDG, they can make this a very, very quick turnaround. Both games in the 20s so far. Can we get a third one of that? Well, we're going to have to see in game number 3, because the winner of game number 3 was Bilibili Gaming. They are able to take game number 3. They're able to stay alive in this series, and we move on at the very least into a game number 4. Really nice win from them. They obviously needed this or else their split was over. You certainly didn't want to go out in a sweep in the finals. That's not how you wanted to end your season, but I think you will accept at the very least a win in this series against a team like JDG, who really is just kind of clicking on all cylinders right now. But while they were able to win, it wasn't exactly the cleanest game of all time. They definitely made more of the positive plays, but wasn't exactly perfect coming out from BLG, just enough to be able to take the game. Let's go ahead and talk about what ended up happening. The early game was a little bit back and forth. Both teams kind of trading ganks. BLG ends up getting first blood with a really nice gank out of Jun in the mid lane onto Knight. Really great job interrupting his escape pattern to be able to get him. It's pretty difficult to get onto that Lissandra early game, but, when you're good, like Jun is, he was able to do it there. JDG answer with a really nice 4-man bot side. They send Knight down, they send Kanavi down. They really want to try to get Ruler on this Aphelios ahead, and they really do a good job of that early. I think Kanavi actually picks up the first kill down there, but at the very least, you're getting that snowball rolling. Elk on the Xayah, by the way, definitely something worth noting. And then 369 actually gets ganked in the top lane, and that's really where things start to kind of take an advantage for BLG. Obviously, they get the advantage from the first blood, but JDG with that play bot lane equaling it out a little bit. It's the gank on top lane that really starts to make it a little bit more difficult for JDG to own the map in the early game, kind of like they did in the first 2 games of the series. Jun doing a really good job taking control of this early game and making the Vi pick count. I always talk about this on the channel, but Vi's one of those picks that you really do have to make count. Like, you have to make it work because you don't have infinite time with Vi to be useful. She is, quote-unquote useful towards the back half of a lot of these games, but it's not going to be quite as useful as it would be if you were to generate gold on her. She just becomes incredibly squishy in the back half of games if she's not super far ahead, and so you want to try to make that early game as advantageous for yourself and for your team as you possibly can, and I think Jun definitely did that here. It was a nice lead for for BLG against JDG. Mid-game is where it starts to get a little bit trickier. There are a couple fights in the mid-game that are pretty nice, some of them actually going in favor of JDG. I mean, Yagao continues to get caught. Quite frankly, Yagao has been a major weakness for BLG in the finals so far across all 3 games, and even in this win here, he was easily the worst performing member of the team. It's definitely starting to be a little bit concerning coming out from BLG, but, you know, at the very least, they're able to trade it off with a couple of picks onto 369. Even on the second one, they're able to get Knight, which kind of leads into them getting Baron. Obviously, that's going to be a massive shift in power. Baron for Gwen is going to be big, but they end up getting a pick onto Gwen. It's pick after pick after pick. It just feels like this game is kind of stalling until we finally get this, like, massive, you know, break point, I guess you could say. Second Baron ends up going the way, it might be third Baron, one of the Barons ends up going the way of BLG because Yagao actually positions super aggro. He ends up getting caught out for it, ends up getting taken down for it, but at the very least, BLG are able to walk out with Baron, and that leads us into our 5th dragon. As you can see, you know, 6 dragons or 3 dragons apiece here, nobody getting soul, but super close fight at that 5th Drake that does go the way of BLG. It's incredibly close. It is incredibly close, but BLG is able to take it with their gold lead. Elk plays it well enough, and I think Bin is doing a lot of work on the backline here on the Gwen. And of course, the Vi being able to interrupt so much of what JDG ends up trying to set up is really important. Of course, they go and try and end the game at around 30-ish minutes, but they don't feel like they can do that, so they leave. They go take Baron again, and then they're able to end the game. It's good composure, but I think you probably could have ended it at 30 minutes. I guess you just wanted to draw it out a bit more. You didn't want any mistakes, and I can understand that. But congrats to BLG for being able to win this game. Jun is going to get my player of the game. I didn't really have to think about this one all that hard. He was really good in the early game. Created a lot of opportunities for BLG, and that's kind of what you wanted to see out of Jun. Obviously, JDG has been really good in the early games across the series so far, but when you look at BLG's previous series, especially against OMG and EDG, what they really did well was generate those leads early, be able to translate those into kind of unthrowable games, if you will, and then just kind of be able to close it out. And that's kind of what you did here in Game 3. You haven't been able to do that up until this point in this series, so I like seeing the aggression come out of the jungle. I think the Vi pick definitely worked out here. Obviously, it doesn't need to be Vi, but something in that area I think is definitely going to be positive for BLG, maybe as opposed to the, you know, the quote-unquote comfort pick of Kindred that I just don't think necessarily plays into the style of what BLG needs to be doing. I thought Bin was much better in this game. Not that he was, like, horrible in the previous games. He was making good plays, but the team wasn't necessarily following up. I think he had a much bigger impact on the game. He was up like 40 CS. I know I always talk about how like teams are actively opting into the Gwen versus Cassante matchup, and I really don't see it as like super Gwen favored, but this game kind of showed why it's Gwen favored. In fact, JDG actually takes the Cassante into Gwen. They R5 Cassante into Gwen, and so they want that matchup because they feel 369 has been good on it this series so far, and honestly, he has moments where he looks strong, but for the most part, Bin was really successful in this game, absolutely destroyed the laning phase and was able to get a couple of really crucial picks in the mid to late game, and then Elk and On were also pretty fine, but I would say it was really Jun and Bin that were creating a lot of the pressure and the power on the side of BLG. As for JDG on the other side, my dud of the game is going to go to 369 in the top lane. He actually had some really good plays. He was able to kind of keep the game alive sometimes and, you know, really be influential in teamfights because Cassante, just generally speaking, is a super overtuned champion. He's just not a very good design choice in my opinion, but even with all that, sometimes you still can get caught out on that champion, and 369 was caught out a lot this game, 2-3 times, just dying in a side lane for no reason, no vision, giving over objectives, getting Knight killed when he tries to TP in to save him as well, just really, really not great macro coming out from 369, and this is a lot more akin to what we were seeing, not only in the previous series against BLG, but in the regular season for 369 as well. Wasn't exactly having the best year of his entire career, but, you know, he was really good up until this point in the playoffs, and so I'm willing to cut him a little bit of slack. I thought Kanavi actually had a pretty decent game. He did a good job trying to salvage things back, but Knight wasn't particularly effective. The Tom Kench pick did literally nothing. I don't think it did anything the entire game, and Ruler just couldn't get in on the Aphelios, and so overall, like, if you're JDG, you're not freaking out too much. It's okay that you lost this game. You're not going to lose the series because of it, but you do probably want to get this done in 4. You certainly don't want this going to a game 5 with BLG having won 2 games in a row. That's the kind of momentum you just do not want to run into, but for BLG, this keeps you alive. You still got to get it done. Game 4 is certainly a must-win on the table as well, but this should be enough confidence to be able to get you to the point where, at the very least, you should feel good going into game number 4. You aren't the complete and utter underdogs that just have no chance of winning. You should feel confidence in yourself, and you should know that you are able to beat this team like you were in this game. But are they going to be able to do it? Are they going to be able to continue to extend this series out, or is JDG going to prove that game 3 was a little bit of a blip on the radar? Well, the winner of game number 4 was JD Gaming. They are able to take game number 4. They're able to close out the series with a 3-1 win, and they are able to call themselves your official 2023 Spring Split champions. Incredibly happy, incredibly excited for JD Gaming. We all were hoping that they were going to be able to get to this level, that this super team of sorts, when put together, was going to be able to live up to expectations. And they have more than done that. They're walking away from this first split as champions and as dominant champions, going through everybody in their path. Yes, it was only 2 teams in the playoffs, but, I mean, go watch the regular season games if you want to see them absolutely destroy some teams on their way here. And trust me, EDG and BLG proved themselves to be 2 very valiant contenders this split, but JDG was not going to be taken down. And that was proven here in game number 4. What ended up happening? How did we get here? Well, this was the most, I would say, back and forth JDG win of the series. Not to say that it was particularly back and forth. I will, some early plays coming out from BLG, as is kind of customary from this team, as we've seen from them throughout the playoffs so far. But Missing caught out early. Nice gank for BLG for first blood. Really, really like the play that they go in and make. I think On in particular was actually really good across the beginning part of this game. A lot of really nice Nautilus hooks. We got this pick on Missing. There's going to be another in the mid game as well that I like the aggressiveness. Even when this team was down, On was looking for plays, and that's something that I've really liked about him as a player for a really long time. It's why I've always been higher on him than I think what the consensus is. It's because he's never really stopped, he doesn't stop looking for things, even when it probably isn't in his best interest. And I think for the most part, that's a positive trait, so long as your team is actually backing it up, right? But this is where we really start to get into the the dynamic gameplay that we saw out of JDG in this final game. And this is just incredibly impressive stuff. We all know how mechanically talented all these players are individually. We all knew that it wasn't going to be a problem for them to be able to win 1v1 or 2v2 throughout their season, but we were kind of wondering if they were going to click on a macro level, if they were going to be willing to give up resources in order to enable the rest of the team. And I think all of those doubts are gone after this game number 4. I mean, this is how you end the split. This is about as good as you can look. Really good fight in Upper River. I believe it was around First Herald at around 8-ish minutes into the game. 369 with a phenomenal flank on BLG through their own jungle that sets up a really nice fight for JDG that they win pretty handily. And then the macro plays coming out from this top lane Gragas do not end there. He goes mid lane for a really nice gank onto Knight. They chain that perfectly with CC coming out from the Charm. And then another gank mid lane, another perfect CC chain with Knight's Charm, and then he's bot lane making a play for the bot lane, and it's like, okay, well, Bin's ahead in CS, he's like 30 CS up, but 369 has actively contributed to every single other lane in the entire game, getting super far ahead on the side of JDG. This is just a macro masterclass coming out from the top laner, and it's really impressive stuff. I think a lot of people were looking at 369 as someone who really needed to step up and kind of, play that mechanical style against a player like Bin, who kind of bodied him in the previous series that they played against each other, but instead he went the complete opposite direction. He said, Bin's a good player, but I'm going to make a bigger impact on the game. Bin can go ahead and win lane. I don't care, so long as the rest of my teammates get ahead, and he absolutely did that on the Gragas. I very much wanted to give him player of the game, but obviously we'll get to who I gave it to in just a bit. But basically from that point onwards, JDG develops a really nice lead, and it just keeps growing bigger and bigger and bigger. It's just good fight after good fight after good fight for JD Gaming. They're securing objectives, they're controlling the map, just doing everything that you're supposed to in this game. Eventually, BLG feels like they have to sit inside their base, and JDG is, looking to close out. They're able to grab Baron basically for free. Not really a lot of, I don't want to say contention there, but not a lot of resistance coming out from BLG, and, they're playing it right, they're playing it slow, they're trying to scale up, they're trying to get this Xayah in a position where she can teamfight, they're trying to get Fiora a bit more gold, but JDG know that they can just force the issue. They can just take inhibitors and just push for the win if BLG is going to play incredibly passive towards the back half of the game. Eventually, BLG have to make a play, and they're just not able to. They're too far behind at this point in the game, and JDG is able to close out, and they're able to crown themselves the 2023 LPL champions, and, it's really, really good stuff. Player of the game for me, and player of the series at the same time, is going to go to Knight in the mid lane. And, obviously I'm a big fan of Knight. I've talked about it for many, many years. I had him as my #1 ranked player in the world. Last year going into Worlds, I thought he has been criminally underrated by the community for so long. Him and Chovy are very similar players in that they both get listed as these, selfish players that don't, help you win, that they're not conducive to winning. Their play style and the way that they play the game is not conducive to winning, and that is just so wrong that I can't even begin to explain. Do both of those players have flaws? Yes. Is there a single player in the world who doesn't have a flaw? No, there just isn't, right? But Knight and Chovy, you know, both respectively, just won their leagues and just proved that if you're just the best player, like if you're just the most talented player with the best mechanics and you can grow and learn and adapt and become one of the better team players out of your position in the region, then you're gonna be unstoppable. And I think Knight really showed that off in this series. His mechanics are just unparalleled. Like there's nobody at the position that can really keep up with him in the LPL, and it's a stacked position in the LPL. That's just how good Knight is. You pair that with someone like Kanavi, who he has great synergy with. Kanavi did take a back seat this year for the most part, but I think it was to the benefit of his mid laner. It was kind of the opposite of what he gave with Yagao last year, but I definitely think it was a positive for JDG overall, with 369 being willing to basically abandon his lane to get Knight super far ahead, and then Ruler and Missing just kind of scaling up in the bot lane. Like, you have so many options, and this Ahri has the ability to play so aggro in the mid to late game, and Knight as a player, if you give him that opportunity, if you give him that kind of freedom, he's going to take advantage of it like almost nobody else in the entire world. But you know, Ruler was awesome. I think Broadcast gave Ruler the player of the game. He wasn't quite influential in the early game, quite like Knight or 369 were, but he was the late game insurance policy for them, and he absolutely came through on the Jinx. Those team fights were massive towards the end of the game, and he really racked up a bunch of kills over the back half. 369 was invaluable this game. I really wanted to give player of the game to 369, but I just felt Knight was too good this game to not give it to him. But for 369 to say, like, it's okay if I just abandon everything I have top lane to go and get everybody else ahead, it's just really impressive stuff, and it's really good selflessness from someone who, you know, obviously has won a title. He won it in summer, but, you know, really is going to do anything he can to help his team win, and that's what you want to see out of a top lane position. Kanavi was phenomenal this series. Ruler and Missing were great. JDG was just great. This is the best team in the LPL and perhaps the best team in the world. And then for BLG on the other side, not a great series. This is easily the worst series of the playoffs for you, including your first loss to JDG. You just really weren't all that competitive today. Game 3 was nice, but even in that game number 3, my dud of the game, Yagao, really stood out, and not in a good way. He was a problem for BLG today, and this is just going to be what it was. This very much felt like regular season BLG, like early season BLG, where Jun and Yagao were not on the same page. Yagao was getting picked off in the mid lane way too much. Bin was creating leads, quote unquote, in the top lane, but not really doing anything with them, not having a huge impact on the game. And Elk and On were just kind of there. Like, they were good, and they were getting kills. In game number 2, they got that kill under tower. In this game, they got that first blood with On playing really well in the Nautilus. Like, they were definitely the bright spot of the team, but there's only so much that you can do as a bot lane when the rest of your team is losing, and when the other AD carry isn't exactly making mistakes that you can punish all that frequently. It was just an unfortunate series for BLG. I do think that there is still a lot of room for this team to grow, which is a good thing to say, considering they're going to be playing international tournaments soon, but there definitely are question marks raised about this team maybe playing some of the better teams in the entire world. Their early game is their strength. When they can generate that early lead and carry that into the mid game, they can beat almost anybody in the world. We saw that when they beat JDG in a couple of games in their series earlier on in the playoffs. However, they're not going to be particularly good if they have to play on the back foot. They're just not super used to it. And I don't think Jun and Yagao and Bin as players are all that good at playing without advantages. I think they really want to be playing with the tempo so that they can make some of these more aggressive plays. Even a player like On, I think, falls into that category a little bit. But at the end of the day, you've still got world-class players in their roles. Players like Elk, who I think is a top 5 ADC in the world. A player like Bin, who is very likely a top 5 top laner in the world. You definitely have talent on this team that can carry you across the finish line. You just got to be able to pick your head up, be able to rebound from what was, quite frankly, just the worst series that you probably could have shown, and just know and trust that you're going to be able to play to the style that you showed against teams like EDG and OMG to get to this place in the first place. But for JDG, congratulations to them. They very much earned it, and it's really, really good to see a super team actually pay off a lot of the preseason hype. Alright, but that is going to do it, not only for my LPL Finals overview and analysis, but for my 2023 Spring Split LPL overview and analysis. I really do hope you guys enjoyed. Again, if you did, let me know down in the comment section below, and of course, hit that like button. It really does mean a lot for the channel, and, you know, I don't usually ask this at a lot of the end of videos, but, you know, we're kind of getting to that part of the year that I'm going to start, you know, shilling stuff a little bit more, but, you know, as great as likes and subs are, because I really do appreciate what you guys do, if you really want to support the channel, go watch some more videos. Ad retention, or sorry, watch retention, so massive in the algorithm right now, and it really does mean a lot to me that, you know, maybe some of these LPL fans, maybe some of you guys that are watching all the content that I put out on the LPL, maybe you want to know what I think of the LCK playoffs. Maybe you want to know what I think of the LCS playoffs and what I think of the LEC teams. Now that we're getting closer to MSI, of course, we'll be doing a ton of MSI content coming out in the next couple of weeks, but if you're interested in that, you can go ahead and check it out on the channel. Of course, the LPL playlist is still linked up in the iCard right now for you to check out, but I really do appreciate you guys enjoying the content, letting me know that down in the comment section below. You guys have been great throughout the split so far, and, you know, with spring split ending, summer split's going to be just as fun. Of course, congrats to JDG for being able to take the trophy, and with all that being said, I hope you all are having a great day. I hope you continue to have a great day, and I will see you all later.